pay tribute to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people, and pay tribute to their elders past and present. Let me start by telling you where 11 of my Year 9 students were just about a month ago. They were spending 4 days on a cultural exchange with the Yorta Yorta community, and the highlight of the event was the evening they spent in the company of and learning from Uncle Boydie and his daughter Leonie. It was a session which was scheduled to last for 45 minutes. It went on for more than 2 hours. And the students, who were overwhelmed by the entire experience of their time with the community, identified the evening they spent learning from Uncle Boydie as the absolute highlight. By the way, Warren, a former student of my school, and I believe 1 or 2 other people here tonight, asked me how Scopus has changed since your day. I'm not quite sure how long ago that was, but
not that long.
And the answer is some things change and some things stay the same. But one of the things that has changed is a real commitment to be part of reconciliation, a commitment to learn about the Aboriginal people of our land and to work with them. And I'm very pleased that I can pay tribute to my friend and colleague Itai Flesher, who's here tonight, who is the visionary who has spearheaded this program, who has created the Yorta Yorta experience in particular, but has done so much to bring Scopus and its students along the reconciliation journey. So these girls, they were all girls, reflected on their meeting with Uncle Boydie. And they said, in particular, they learnt 3 things. And the first is that they learnt from your life story, which you told so eloquently, and I'm told they were hanging on your every word for more than an hour. And they learnt of the discrimination that applied to Aboriginal people in Uncle Boydie's own lifetime. The idea that there were limits on how Aboriginal people could move, not to mention many other hardships and aspects of discrimination that Indigenous people suffered, which was a revelation, as indeed is often a revelation to young people today, that in our own country, in the lifetime of people still alive today, there was such a system which is so abhorrent and unimaginably abhorrent. And the second thing they learnt was the story of William Cooper. A story that they had known before, because part of the preparation for this trip was an intensive learning experience over the course of a whole term. But a story that you brought to life, and they understood so much more of his struggle and so much more of his legacy. And the third thing that they gained from that encounter was a desire to work for reconciliation. And I want to talk about those 2 last points in particular, because really that's why we're here tonight. William Cooper and reconciliation. William Cooper, as I think we all know, and I have little to add to the biography that's on the information in front of you, was a man passionate about his Christian faith, a man of great brilliance and learning, and a man who strove for justice, for social justice. He strove for justice for his people, campaigning for things which today, of course, are taken for granted: representation in Parliament, land rights, enfranchisement, in a time when these things were just not considered fit for Aboriginal people. He organised a petition to write to the King. He created, together with others, the Australian Aboriginal League as a vehicle to promote this campaign. But what strikes me about the story that we all know, is that there are some people who fight for justice for themselves because they want a better life. And there are some people who fight for justice because they believe in justice as a principle. And what's the difference between these two? It's very simple. Is whether they extend that fight for justice beyond their own people and apply it to others as well. And to me, that is the significance of the Kristallnacht story. because it tells us so clearly that William Cooper was a man who believed in justice for everyone, for every oppressed people, be they Aboriginal people, be they Jewish people, be they human beings. And for him to lead what was probably the only private protest against the treatment of the Jews, when we're talking 1938, before the war, when for so many people what was going on in Germany was either something that happens far away, or something that was an internal matter, or something that wasn't so bad. For William Cooper to be one of the few people in the world who realized at that early stage that what was happening to the Jews of Germany was wrong, and demanded his attention, and demanded his activism. That is truly remarkable. And that proves that William Cooper was motivated not just by a desire to improve the lot of Indigenous people, important and essential, and so right that was, but to fight for justice for every people. And that is his legacy. And as I said, the other thing that our students learned from their time with Uncle Boydie was a renewed commitment to reconciliation. Reconciliation today is now part of the Australian psyche. It's part of the Australian character. I have not been in Australia for so long, only 10 years, and I wasn't there when reconciliation itself had to be fought for and had to get its place on the map, as it were, of what Australia believes and what Australia does. But now we live in a time where it is understood, and the things that we talk about and we teach about in our school is an example of this, that it is time for the European, for the white community, to learn about the Aboriginal people, to show respect for their culture, for their way of life, and for their tremendous history, and to join with them in their fight for equality. It is well known that Aboriginal people are still denied access to jobs in the same way as white people, access to health. It is well known that young Aboriginal people are far more likely to be in prison than other Australians. We are far from equality, and that battle has much more fight in it. But when it comes to respect, I feel that Jewish people have a particular reason to be empathetic, and a particular reason to regard reconciliation as a vital cause. And that's not just because we, in common with every other group, believe in justice, believe in kindness to other people, believe in helping the stranger, but because we particularly, we know what it's like to have a culture, an ancient culture, that we strive to preserve. We too know what it's like to value passing on that culture, passing on that language to our children, so that the culture which has existed for thousands of years will continue to exist for several thousand more. We too know what it's like to have an ancient language nearly lost and yet revived and become again a living language which we teach to our children. And we too know what it's like to be attached to a land and to lose that land, but to never lose that emotional and psychological connection with that land. And we who have been blessed to see our people return to their land in the last century can understand how the Aboriginal people will never lose their connection with the land that is theirs. We as Jews have a particular responsibility, and in my opinion a particular privilege, to be part of reconciliation in Australia. Now, we've talked about William Cooper and what a remarkable man he was. And we've talked about his legacy and what we can learn from him. And we've talked about reconciliation. But what can we do in practice to bring about these ends? We who live in Melbourne, who live comfortable lives, we can pay some sort of regard to these ideals. But tonight we have an opportunity to do something practical, to do something to make a real contribution to these issues that I'm talking about. Tonight we have an opportunity to help Uncle Boydie continue William Cooper's story, to bring it to the next level of completion, and to ensure that that story itself will be told again and again to hundreds, to thousands, to tens of thousands of others. We have an opportunity, as we already heard tonight from Abe, to help Uncle Boydie to get to Beersheba. The charge in Beersheba in 1917 is particularly resonant for us as Australians and us as Jews. It was one of the major actions in which the original Australian army, so soon after Federation, helped forge this nation's history and this nation's identity. But it took place in Beersheba, in what was then Palestine. It was a vital stage on the journey for the British to conquer Palestine from the Ottomans, which enabled them to put into action the Balfour Declaration, which brought about the State of Israel. Uncle Boydie will be going, with our help, to pay tribute to the Aboriginal soldiers who fought with the Anzacs in Beersheba and elsewhere in the First World War. A story that is largely untold. And we have an opportunity to help Uncle Boydie tell that story. But from Israel, he wants to go to Germany, to Berlin, to complete the mission of William Cooper, to deliver the letter that was not delivered in 1938, that the Germans rejected, and I suspect, by the way, the Germans never bothered even to collect from the postbox. To close that circle, and to, in an era which is so different, thankfully, from 1938, an era of peace between Australia and Germany, an era of Jewish enfranchisement and civil rights, and an era when we're still fighting for full civil rights for Aboriginal brothers. We want to help Uncle Boydie bring that story to a completion. And part of the project, and a crucial part of the project, is to raise funds to ensure that not only can these visits take place, but they can be documented and recorded precisely so that story can be told. As Warren said, it is truly a privilege to be in the same room as an Aboriginal leader and as a descendant of a great leader and a great icon of social justice. But it's not enough to feel good about sitting in the same room. We tonight have an opportunity to help this cause, to tell the story, to do something in a very real way for the legacy of William Cooper and for reconciliation itself. And I look to you to make whatever contribution you can. In a few moments, the